Good afternoon, boys and girls. We're going to continue reading A Bear Called Paddington this afternoon. Remember, last time we read Paddington, he had gone off to the theater with the Browns, and he was already running into some new situations he just didn't know how to deal with. For example, every time somebody asked him if he wanted something, like a program or to check his coat, and he would say yes, they would then ask him for money, which was starting to get frustrating to him because he thought that they were just asking to be nice, not because they wanted him to buy something. Then when they finally went and sat down in their seats, he put his marmalade sandwich up on the edge of the balcony rail, and when he took his coat off, the sandwich fell on top of somebody's head who was way below, and they were not happy either. So that's where we're going to start today. "Crikey," said Jonathan, "it's fallen on someone's head." He looked over the edge of the box. "It's the man with the bald head. He looks jolly cross." "Oh, Paddington," Mrs. Brown looked desperately at him. "Do you have to bring marmalade sandwiches to the theater?" "It's all right," said Paddington cheerfully. "I've some more in the other pocket, if anybody wants one. They're a bit squashed, I'm afraid, because I sat on them in the car. There seems to be some sort of rumpus going on down below," said Mr. Brown, craning his head to look around over the edge. "Some chap just waved his fist at me. And what's all this about marmalade sandwiches?" Mr. Brown was a bit slow on the uptake sometimes. "Nothing, dear," said Mrs. Brown hastily. She decided to let the matter drop. It was much easier in the long run. In any case, Paddington was having a great struggle with himself over some opera glasses that he had just seen a little box in front of him marked opera glasses, 20 pence. Eventually, after a great deal of thought, he unlocked his suitcase and from a secret compartment withdrew 20 pence. "I don't think much of these," he said a moment later, looking through them at the audience. "Everyone looks smaller." "You've got them going the wrong way round, silly," said Jonathan. "Well, I still don't think much of them," said Paddington, turning them round. "I wouldn't have bought them if I'd known. Still," he added after a moment's thought, "they might come in useful next time." Just as he began to speak, the overture came to an end and the curtain rose. The scene was the living room of a large house, and Sir Seeley Bloom, in the part of the village squire, was pacing up and down. There was a round of applause from the audience. "You don't take them home," whispered Judy. "You have to put them back when you leave." "What?" cried Paddington in a loud voice. Several calls of "Hush!" came from the darkened theater as Sir Seeley Bloom paused and looked pointedly in the direction of the Browns' box. "Do you mean to say—" Words failed Paddington for the moment. 20 pence, he said bitterly. "That's 2 buns worth." He turned his gaze on Sir Seeley Bloom. Sir Seeley Bloom looked rather irritable. He didn't like first nights, and this one in particular had started badly. He had a nasty feeling about it. He much preferred playing the hero, where he had the sympathy of the audience. And in this play, he was the villain. The villain is the bad guy. Being the first night of the play, he wasn't at all sure of some of his lines. To make matters worse, he had arrived at the theater only to discover that the prompt boy was missing, and there was no one else to take his place. Then there was the disturbance in the stalls just before the curtains went up. Something to do with a marmalade sandwich. So the stage manager had said, of course, that was all the nonsense, but still it was very disturbing. And then there was the noisy crowd in the box. He sighed to himself. It was obviously going to be one of those nights. But if Sir Seeley Bloom's heart was not in the play, Paddington certainly was. He soon forgot about his wasted 20 pence and devoted all his attention to the plot. He decided quite early on that he didn't like Sir Seeley Bloom, and he stared at him hard through his opera glasses. He followed his every move, and when at the end of the first act, Sir Seeley, in the part of the hard-hearted father, turned his daughter out into the world without a penny, Paddington stood up on his chair and waved his program indignantly at the stage. Paddington was a surprising bear in many ways, and he had a strong sense of right and wrong. As the curtain came down, he placed his opera glasses firmly on the ledge and climbed off his seat. "Are you enjoying it, Paddington?" asked Mr. Brown. "It's very interesting," said Paddington. He had a determined note to his voice, and Mrs. Brown looked at him sharply. He was beginning to recognize that tone, and it worried her. "Where are you going, dear?" she asked as he made for the door of the box. "Oh, just for a walk," said Paddington vaguely. "Well, don't be too long," she called in the door as the door closed behind him. "You don't want to miss any of the second act." "Oh, don't fuss, Mary," said Mr. Brown. "I expect that he just wants to stretch his legs or something. He's probably gone out to the cloakroom." But at that moment, Paddington was going not in the direction of the cloakroom, but towards a door leading to the back of the theater. It was marked "Private, Actors Only." As he pushed the door open and passed through, he immediately found himself in an entirely different world. There were no red plush seats. Everything was very bare. Lots of ropes hung down from the roof. Pieces of scenery were stacked against the walls, and everyone seemed in a great hurry. "I think he's backstage." Normally, Paddington would have been more interested in everything, but now he had a purposeful look on his face. Seeing a man bending over some scenery, he walked over and tapped him on the shoulder. "Excuse me," he said, "can you tell me where the man is?" The scene hand went on working. "Man," he said, "what man?" "The man," said Paddington patiently, "the nasty man." "Oh, you mean Sir Seeley." The scene hand pointed towards a long corridor. "He's in his dressing room. You better not go disturbing him, 'cause he's not in a very good mood." He looked up. "Hey!" he cried. "You're not supposed to be in here. Who let you in?" Paddington was too far away to answer. Even if he had heard, he was already halfway up the corridor, looking closely at all the doors. Eventually, he came to one with a large star on it and the words "Sir Seeley Bloom" in big gold letters. Paddington drew a deep breath and then knocked loudly. There was no reply, so he knocked again. Still there was no reply, and so very cautiously he pushed open the door with his paw. "Go away," said a booming voice. "I don't want to see anyone." Paddington peered round the door. Sir Seeley Bloom was lying stretched out on a long couch. He looked tired and cross. He opened one eye and gazed at Paddington. "I am not signing any autographs," he growled. "I don't want your autograph," said Paddington, fixing him with a hard stare. "I wouldn't want your autograph if I had my autograph book, and I haven't got my autograph book, so there." Sir Seeley sat up. "You don't want my autograph?" he said in a surprised voice. "But everyone always wants my autographs." "Well, I don't," said Paddington. "I've come to tell you to take your daughter back." He gulped the last few words. The great man seemed to have grown to about twice the size that he had been on the stage, and he looked as if he were going to explode at any minute. Sir Seeley clutched his forehead. "You want me to take my daughter back?" he said at last. "That's right," said Paddington firmly, "and if you don't, I expect she can come and stay with Mr. and Mrs. Brown." Sir Seeley Bloom ran his hand distractedly through his hair and then pinched himself. "Mr. and Mrs. Brown?" he repeated in a dazed voice. He looked wildly around the room and then dashed to the door. "Sarah!" he called in a loud voice. "Sarah, come in here at once." He backed around the room until he had placed the couch between himself and Paddington. "Keep away, Bear," he said dramatically, and then peered at Paddington, for he was rather short-sighted. "You are a bear, aren't you?" he added. "That's right," said Paddington, "from darkest Peru." Sir Seeley looked at his woolen hat. "Well, then," he said crossly, playing for time, "you ought to know better than to wear a green hat in my dressing room. Don't you know green is a very unlucky color in the theater? Take it off at once." "It's not my fault," said Paddington. "I wanted to wear my proper hat." He had just started to explain all about his hat when the door burst open and the lady called Sarah entered. Paddington immediately recognized her as Sir Seeley's daughter in the play. "It's all right," he said. "I've come to rescue you." "You've what?" The lady seemed most surprised. "Sarah," Sir Seeley Bloom came out from behind the couch. "Sarah, protect me from this mad bear." "I'm not mad," said Paddington indignantly. "Then kindly explain what you're doing in my dressing room," boomed the great actor. Paddington sighed. Sometimes people were very slow to understand things. Patiently he explained it all to them. When he had finished, the lady called Sarah threw back her head and laughed. "I'm glad you think it's funny," said Sir Seeley. "But darling, don't you see," she said, "it's a great compliment. Paddington really believes that you were throwing me out into the world without a penny. It shows what a great actor you are." Sir Seeley thought for a moment. He said gruffly. "Quite an understandable mistake, I suppose. He looks remarkably intelligent, Bear, come to think of it." Paddington looked from one to the other. "Then you were only acting all the time?" he faltered. The lady bent down and took his paw. "Of course, darling, but it was very kind of you to come to my rescue. I shall always remember it." "Well, I would have rescued you if you wanted it," said Paddington. Sir Seeley coughed. "Are you interested in the theater, Bear?" he boomed. "Oh, yes," said Paddington, "very much. Except I don't like having to pay so much for everything. I want to be an actor when I grow up." The lady called Sarah jumped up. "Why, Seeley, darling," she said, looking at Paddington, "I've an idea," she whispered in Sir Seeley's ear. And then Sir Seeley looked at Paddington. "It's a bit unusual," he said thoughtfully, "but it's worth a try. Yes, it's certainly worth a try." In the theater itself, the interval was almost at the end, and the Browns were getting restless. "Oh dear," said Mrs. Brown, "I wonder where he's got to." "If he doesn't hurry up," said Mrs. Brown, "he's going to miss the start of the second act." Just then there was a knock on the door, and an attendant handed him a note. "A young bear gentleman asked me to give you this," he announced. "He said it was very urgent." And we'll read more about that tomorrow. So, boys and girls, I hope you understand what happened in this chapter of Paddington so far. Paddington saw the actors on the stage, and the one actor was not playing a character that was very nice. In fact, it was kind of a mean character, and he wouldn't take his daughter back, and he threw her out, and she didn't have any money, and she was all on her own, and Paddington thought it was for real. So he went to go find the actor because he wanted to tell him that he needed to take care of her daughter. But in the theater, it's only just pretend. They're pretending to be a part. So that girl that he threw out wasn't really his daughter. It's just a person pretending to be his daughter. But now they have an idea for Paddington. I wonder what it's going to be. I wonder what's going to happen to Paddington. We'll have to find out tomorrow. I'll see you later. Bye.